A grieving billionaire's routine property inspection leads him to a startling discovery in a rundown house. What he finds there forces him to make an impossible choice, uncovering a dark conspiracy that will shake the foundations of his world and reveal a truth that was hidden for 7 years. Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories. Why do I keep doing this to myself? The words echoed through the silent nursery as Alex Mitchell traced his fingers along the dusty model airplane mobile hanging above an empty crib. 7 years, and he still couldn't bring himself to change a single thing in this room. The morning sun filtered through cloud-painted curtains his wife Sarah had chosen, casting shadows that danced across the untouched teddy bears and unopened storybooks. This annual ritual of torture, as his sister Kate called it, had become as much a part of him as breathing. Every year on March 15th, what should have been his son's birthday, Alex would stand in this preserved moment of what could have been, surrounded by dreams that never had the chance to come true. He picked up the silver-framed ultrasound photo from the changing table, the only picture he would ever have of his son. "Happy birthday, kiddo," he whispered, his thumb brushing over the grainy image. "Your mom would have had this place filled with so much noise by now. Probably would have turned it into some kind of art studio for you, knowing her." The thought brought a sad smile to his face. Sarah had been determined their child would be creative, had even painted a mural of hot air balloons on the nursery wall during her 7th month. "The world needs more dreamers," she'd said, paint splattered across her overalls, her pregnant belly making it hard to reach the highest clouds. 2 weeks later they were both gone. His phone buzzed in his pocket, shattering the reverent silence. Alex ignored it. Morgan Stanley could wait. The real estate developers in Shanghai could wait. Today wasn't about. The phone buzzed again, more insistent this time. With a sigh of frustration, Alex pulled it out, ready to silence it, when he noticed the caller ID. James Cooper, his head of acquisitions. "This better be important, James. Sorry to interrupt your morning, sir, but we've got a situation with the Connecticut portfolio." James's voice crackled through the speaker. "Remember that old manufacturing district in Riverside we've been eyeing? Well, turns out there's a competing buyer and they're moving fast. If we want in, we need to inspect the property today." Alex's instinct was to say no. "Not today. Any other day but today." "Sir? Are you there?" He looked around the nursery at this shrine to what never was. Sarah's voice seemed to whisper from the painted clouds above. "The world needs more dreamers. But it also needed people who could act, who could make things happen, who could turn abandoned places into something new." "Text me the address," Alex heard himself say. "I'll do the inspection personally." "Are you sure?" "I know what day it is, sir. I can send." "Text me the address, James." Alex's tone left no room for argument. After ending the call, Alex stood for a moment longer in the nursery doorway. Something felt different this year. The weight of grief was still there, but for the first time, he felt an inexplicable pull to break his ritual, to step away from this preserved moment of pain. "I'll be back," he promised the empty room, then gently closed the door. As his Tesla pulled out of the circular driveway of his Greenwich estate, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. The GPS showed Riverside was only 40 minutes away, but somehow he knew he was starting a much longer journey. What he couldn't know, was that in a rundown house on Maple Street in Riverside, Connecticut, a 7-year-old boy with a distinctive birthmark was about to change everything Alex thought he knew about loss, love, and second chances. The drive to Riverside gave Alex too much time to think. He passed manicured lawns and pristine colonial houses, each one a reminder of the life he and Sarah had planned. They'd spent countless evenings discussing their future, sketching out dreams on the backs of takeout menus and coffee shop napkins. Sarah had wanted a big family, at least 3 kids, she'd always said. Alex had teased her about starting a baseball team. Now his own sprawling estate felt more like a mausoleum than a home. The cleaning service came 3 times a week, but they never touched the nursery. That had been his one non-negotiable rule when he'd hired them. Even Kate, who managed most of his household affairs, knew better than to suggest packing anything away. His phone chimed with James's text just as he passed the "Welcome to Riverside" sign. The GPS recalculated, directing him toward the industrial district. The transition from residential to commercial was jarring, perfectly maintained historic homes giving way to abandoned factories and warehouses, their windows broken, walls covered in graffiti. Alex pulled up to the address James had sent, taking in the crumbling brick facade of what had once been the Riverside Manufacturing Company. The building itself was solid despite its appearance, and the location was perfect for his plans to develop a mixed-use space, apartments, offices, maybe even an arts center. Sarah would have loved that last part. He stepped out of the Tesla, already making mental notes about the property's potential, when a sound caught his attention. It was faint, barely audible over the wind, but unmistakable, a child's cough, followed by what might have been crying. Alex turned toward the source, a small, gray house set back from the street, partially hidden behind overgrown bushes. The contrast between his gleaming car and the dilapidated surroundings suddenly struck him as obscene. Here he was, worth billions, standing in a neighborhood where people were clearly struggling to survive. Sarah's voice echoed in his memory again. The world needs more dreamers. But maybe, he thought, what it really needed was someone willing to wake up and take action. Another cough drifted from the house on Maple Street, this one sounding worse than the first. Alex checked his watch. He had time before his next meeting. Surely it wouldn't hurt to make sure everything was okay? He took a step toward the house, then another, unaware that each step was bringing him closer to fulfilling a promise he'd made 7 years ago in a room filled with dreams. The cough drew Alex closer to the gray house like a beacon. Each step crunched on dead leaves that no one had bothered to rake, the overgrown path telling its own story of neglect. He told himself he was being ridiculous. Probably just some kid homesick from school, nothing to concern himself with. But something about that sound tugged at him. Maybe it was the way it echoed his own emptiness, or maybe it was just that today, of all days, he was more attuned to children's voices. "Get up, you lazy brat." A woman's sharp voice shattered the quiet. "That floor ain't gonna mop itself." Alex froze. Through a gap in the curtains of a ground floor window, he caught glimpses of movement. A small figure stumbled into view, a boy no more than 7 or 8, his thin frame racked by another coughing fit as he dragged a mop across warped floorboards. "I said mop, not hack up a lung." The woman's voice again, followed by the sound of something hitting the floor. "You think we keep you around to spread your germs everywhere?" The boy flinched but didn't stop mopping. Even from outside, Alex could see he was shivering, dressed only in a thin t-shirt despite the March chill. Dark bruises peeked out from under the short sleeves. "Marlene, where's my coffee?" A man's voice this time, gruff with sleep or hangover. "And shut that kid up before I do it myself." Alex's hand was already pulling out his phone when he hesitated. What exactly would he tell the police? That he was trespassing and spying through windows? That he heard something that sounded bad? They'd send someone to check, sure, but how long would that take? And what would happen to the boy in the meantime? Another cough, weaker this time. The boy swayed on his feet, catching himself on the wall. A shaft of sunlight fell across his face, revealing fever-bright eyes and hollow cheeks. As he steadied himself, his sleeve rode up, exposing something on his shoulder, a distinctive mark that made Alex's breath catch in his throat. It couldn't be. The shape was just a coincidence, had to be. His mind was playing tricks on him, seeing what he wanted to see because of what day it was. The sound of breaking glass jerked him back to reality. "Now look what you did." Marlene's screech was followed by the sharp crack of a slap. The boy crumpled to his knees among the shards of a broken coffee mug. "Clean it up." The man's voice again, closer now. "With your hands if you have to." Before Alex could think better of it, he strode to the front door and knocked sharply. The sounds inside ceased abruptly. "Who is it?" The man's voice, suddenly cautious. "Alex Mitchell." He made his voice carry the authority of board meetings and billion-dollar deals. "I'm here about the property." Shuffling sounds, whispered conversation. Alex knocked again, harder. The door opened a crack, revealing a disheveled man in his 50s, Chuck Baker, Alex would later learn. Behind him, Alex caught a glimpse of the boy being hurried out of sight by a thin woman with bottle blonde hair. "Property?" Chuck's bloodshot eyes narrowed. "What property?" "The manufacturing plant next door." Alex gestured vaguely toward his Tesla, letting Chuck draw his own conclusions about what kind of money was involved. "I couldn't help but notice your situation here." Chuck's posture changed subtly, a predatory gleam replacing the suspicion in his eyes. "Situation? The boy?" Alex kept his voice level, fighting down the rage that threatened to choke him. "He needs medical attention." A calculation seemed to run behind Chuck's eyes. He opened the door wider, revealing a living room cluttered with cheap furniture and old takeout containers. "Maybe we should discuss this inside, Mr. Mitchell." Alex stepped through the doorway, his expensive shoes sinking into stained carpet. The contrast between this house and his pristine mansion struck him again, but now it felt less like an indictment and more like an opportunity. "Marlene," Chuck called out. "Bring Tommy in here. Mr. Mitchell wants to talk about helping our situation." From somewhere in the house came another weak cough, followed by the sound of shuffling feet. Alex's hands clenched at his sides, his wedding ring digging into his finger like a reminder of promises made and broken. He thought of Sarah's words painted on the nursery wall, "The world needs more dreamers." But right now this boy didn't need dreams. He needed someone willing to step into this nightmare and end it. As Tommy was led back into the room, Alex caught another glimpse of that birthmark. Even through the haze of impossibility, one thought crystallized with perfect clarity. He wasn't leaving this house without that boy. What he didn't yet understand was just how far Chuck and Marlene would go to profit from his determination, or how that decision would unravel a web of secrets stretching back 7 years to a hospital room where everything had gone terribly, irrevocably wrong. $50,000? Chuck Baker's voice sliced through the silence. Cash. Alex's stomach turned. He sat perfectly still on the threadbare couch, his hands clasped to keep them from shaking, with rage or revulsion. He wasn't sure which. Across the coffee table stained with rings from countless beer cans, Chuck and Marlene Baker watched him like vultures sizing up their next meal. "He's a good worker," Marlene added as if she were selling a used car. "Quiet too. Won't give you no trouble." In the corner of the room, Tommy swayed on his feet, his face flushed with fever. Alex could hear each labored breath, see the tremors running through the boy's small frame. The bruises on his arms stood out stark against his pale skin. $75,000, Chuck amended, mistaking Alex's silence for negotiation. "Final offer. Way I see it, you get yourself a kid, we get to start fresh somewhere else. Everybody wins." Alex forced himself to maintain eye contact, to keep his voice steady. "And how exactly would this transaction work?" "Simple." Chuck leaned forward, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "We sign some papers saying we're giving up our rights. You make a donation to help a struggling family. We disappear, you get your son. Nobody needs to know the details. Your son." The words hit Alex like a physical blow. He looked at Tommy again, at the birthmark partially visible beneath his collar. The same mark his own son had been born with, in that hospital room 7 years ago. It couldn't be coincidence. But if it wasn't? "He needs a doctor," Alex said, watching Tommy's increasingly unsteady movements. Marlene waved a dismissive hand. "Kid's always getting sick. Weak constitution, probably from his real mother. Whatever she was on during pregnancy." "His mother?" Alex cut in, his voice sharp enough to make them both jump. "What do you know about her?" Chuck and Marlene exchanged a quick glance that set alarm bells ringing in Alex's head. "Nothing much," Chuck said too quickly. "Agency handled everything. We just needed the money back then, and they were offering good homes to unwanted babies." Unwanted. The word hung in the air like poison. Alex thought of the nursery he'd left this morning, of 7 years of preserved dreams and impossible hopes. "I'll need to make some calls," he said, pulling out his phone. "Arrange the money." "No calls," Chuck snapped. "Cash only. And we do this today or no deal." Behind them, Tommy's cough had taken on a wet, rattling quality that Alex didn't like at all. The boy's eyes were glassy, unfocused. "Today," Alex agreed, his mind racing. He needed to get Tommy to a hospital, needed time to investigate what was really going on here. "I'll need 2 hours to get the cash." Chuck's eyes narrowed. 1 hour. "And you leave something valuable here as insurance?" Alex slipped off his watch, a Patek Philippe worth more than this entire house, and placed it on the coffee table. "I'll be back in 1 hour. Have whatever paperwork you think you need ready." He stood, fighting the urge to grab Tommy and run. Not yet, he told himself. Do this right. He needed evidence, needed to make sure these people faced justice for whatever they'd done. "Mr. Mitchell?" Tommy's voice was barely a whisper, the first time Alex had heard him speak. The boy took a stumbling step forward, reaching out as if to stop him from leaving. Then Tommy's eyes rolled back in his head and he crumpled to the floor. "Tommy?" Alex moved without thinking, crossing the room in 2 strides to catch the boy before his head hit the ground. The heat radiating from Tommy's small body was terrifying. "Get back," Chuck started to say, but Alex was already lifting Tommy in his arms. "He needs a hospital. Now." Alex's voice had changed, carrying the same tone he used when closing hostile takeovers. "We can do this one of 2 ways. Either you let me take him to the emergency room right now, or I call the police and have them handle it. Your choice." Marlene opened her mouth to object, but Chuck grabbed her arm. "Fine," he spat. "But I'm coming with you. Don't think you can just drive off with the boy. Our merchandise." Alex's mind filled in the unspoken words, and something cold and furious settled in his chest. He looked down at Tommy's unconscious face, at the birthmark that seemed to pulse with each labored breath. 1 hour, he reminded them as he carried Tommy to his car, feeling the boy's heart flutter against his chest like a trapped bird. After the hospital, 1 hour to get your money. Then we finish this. What he didn't say was what else would be finished when that hour was up. As he laid Tommy gently in the backseat of his Tesla, Alex made a silent vow. These people would pay for what they'd done, not just to this boy, but to every child they treated like a commodity. Chuck climbed into the passenger seat, reeking of stale cigarettes and cheap beer. As they pulled away from the house on Maple Street, Alex caught Marlene's silhouette in his rearview mirror. She was already on the phone, and something about her urgent gestures made him wonder just who else might be involved in this devil's bargain. His temperature's 104.2, the ER nurse announced, her fingers flying over equipment with practiced efficiency. Severe dehydration, probable pneumonia. Multiple contusions in various stages of healing. Alex stood at the foot of the emergency room bed, his hands gripping the rail so hard his knuckles had gone white. Tommy lay unconscious, looking impossibly small amid the tangle of monitoring wires and 4 lines. Chuck Baker had been relegated to the waiting room, despite his loud protests about parental rights. "Sir?" A different nurse touched Alex's arm. "We need some information for the admission forms." Alex started, then stopped. What could he say? That he'd found the boy while trespassing? That he was planning to buy him? "He's in the process of being adopted," Alex said finally, the lie feeling like ash in his mouth. "I don't have all his medical history yet." The nurse's expression shifted subtly. She'd seen cases like this before, kids coming through the ER with unexplained injuries, with medical histories that didn't quite add up. "Dr. Harrison to pediatric emergency, stat," crackled over the intercom. A moment later, a woman in her 50s burst through the doors, already snapping on gloves as she read the initial assessments. "Multiple red flags here," she muttered, more to herself than to Alex. "Sarah, start him on broad-spectrum antibiotics. And get me a full panel, blood work, chest x-ray, the works. I want to know everything. Sarah." The name hit Alex like a physical blow. 7 years ago in another hospital, another Sarah had. "Mr. Mitchell?" Dr. Harrison's sharp voice pulled him back. "Are you the legal guardian?" He hesitated. "I'm responsible for him." She fixed him with a penetrating stare. "Then I need you to understand how serious this is. This child hasn't just been neglected, he's been systematically abused. The x-rays show old fractures that never properly healed. He's severely malnourished. And his immune system is so compromised that this pneumonia has hit him like a freight train." Each word felt like an indictment. How long had Tommy suffered while Alex lived in his mansion, mourning a loss that might not even be real? "Will he?" Alex's voice cracked. "Will he be okay?" "We're doing everything we can," Dr. Harrison said, her tone softening slightly. "But the next few hours are critical. We need to get his fever down and—" "Doctor?" one of the nurses called out. "His O2 stats are dropping." The next few minutes were a blur of activity. Alex found himself pushed back against the wall as medical personnel swarmed around Tommy's bed. Through gaps in the controlled chaos, he caught glimpses of the boy's face, now partially obscured by an oxygen mask. "Come on, kiddo," he whispered. "Fight." As if in response, the monitors steadied. Dr. Harrison stepped back, releasing a breath. "He's stabilizing. Sarah, let's get him changed into a gown and—" "Oh my God." The nurse who'd been helping Tommy into a hospital gown had frozen, staring at something on his shoulder. "Dr. Harrison, you need to see this." Alex knew what they were looking at before they said anything. He'd seen it himself, had been trying to convince himself it was impossible, but— "It's a birthmark," the nurse was saying. "But I've never seen one quite like this. It almost looks like—" "A butterfly," Alex finished quietly. "With one wing slightly smaller than the other." They all turned to look at him. 7 years ago," he continued, his voice distant even to his own ears, "my wife Sarah gave birth in this hospital. There were complications. They told me both she and the baby died. But before everything went wrong, the nurse noted our son had an unusual birthmark. She said it looked just like that." Dr. Harrison's expression had changed completely. 7 years ago? Do you remember the date?" "March 15th. Alex's laugh held no humor. "Today's his birthday." The doctor was already reaching for a phone. "I need the records for all births and deaths from March 15th, 2018. And someone get me security. We have a situation with the man in the waiting room claiming to be this child's father." But Alex barely heard her. He'd moved to Tommy's bedside, gently brushing sweat-soaked hair from the boy's forehead. The oxygen mask fogged with each breath, still too rapid, too shallow, but steady. "I'm here," he whispered. "I don't know how this happened or who's responsible, but I'm here now. And I'm not going anywhere." Tommy's eyelids fluttered. For a moment, fever-bright eyes met Alex's, and something passed between them, recognition, perhaps, or just the desperate need to believe that something good could come from so much pain. Then Tommy's eyes closed again, but his small hand had found its way into Alex's. Through the hospital sounds, the beeping monitors, the squeaking shoes, the overhead pages, Alex heard Dr. Harrison speaking urgently into the phone. "Yes, I need the police here immediately. And contact Administrator Chin. We may have evidence of birth record falsification from 7 years ago. I need to know who was on duty that night, who had access to." Her voice faded as she stepped into the hallway. Alex stayed where he was, holding Tommy's hand, watching the rise and fall of his chest. Outside the room, he could hear raised voices, Chuck Baker discovering he wouldn't be allowed back in, security being called. But none of that seemed to matter as much as the slight pressure of Tommy's fingers around his, or the perfect match of that butterfly birthmark to the one he'd memorized in a grief-filled moment 7 years ago. For the first time since losing Sarah, Alex felt something he'd thought had died with her: hope. The monitors beeped steadily, marking each precious second as father and son. Though neither yet knew for certain that's what they were, held on to each other through the storm. The soft glow of Alex's laptop illuminated the hospital room as Tommy slept peacefully for the first time in days. The antibiotics were finally working, his fever down to manageable levels. Outside, streetlights pierced the gathering dusk, casting long shadows across stacks of documents spread across the small bedside table. "You won't believe what we found," Emma Chin, the hospital administrator, whispered as she entered the room. Her arms were full of more files, her face tight with contained anger. "The birth records from that night, they've been altered. Professionally, but if you know what to look for." Alex rubbed his tired eyes. 3 days had passed since Tommy's admission, and he'd barely left the hospital. His security team had the Bakers under surveillance, his lawyers were building a case, and a small army of private investigators was unraveling 7 years of lies. "Show me," he said, clearing space for the new files. Emma laid out 3 documents side by side. "This is the original birth certificate for your son, the one recording his death. Notice anything strange about the time stamp?" Alex leaned forward, squinting at the faded text. 3:47 a.m. "Now look at Sarah's death certificate. 3:12 a.m. Alex's throat tightened. "My son was recorded as dying after Sarah?" "Exactly. But here's where it gets interesting." Emma pulled out another document. "This is Tommy's earliest record with the Bakers. It lists his birth mother as Jane Smith, about as generic as you can get. But look at the hospital of birth. St. Mary's." Alex's hands clenched. "The same hospital where Sarah? The same wing, the same night?" Emma's voice hardened. "And here's the kicker. The attending physician's signature on both certificates? Dr. James Warren. He left the hospital suddenly 2 months later, disappeared completely. Until now." She slid another photo across the table, a surveillance shot of a man leaving a clinic in Vermont. "He's been working under an assumed name, but he's made some interesting deposits over the years. Always cash, always just under reporting limits." Tommy stirred in his sleep, and both adults fell silent until his breathing steadied again. Alex studied his son's face, seeing Sarah's features more clearly with each passing day. "There's more," Emma continued softly. "Once we knew what to look for, patterns emerged. Between 2018 and 2022, 16 babies were recorded as stillborn at St. Mary's. All had grieving families with means. All had birth and death certificates signed by Dr. Warren. And all within hours of healthy babies being abandoned at various hospitals across New England." Alex's laptop pinged with a new email. His lead investigator had finally gotten access to the Bakers' financial records. "Look at this," he said, turning the screen. "Regular payments from an offshore account, starting 7 years ago. The amounts match what they wanted for Tommy. A finder's fee," Emma breathed. They weren't just abusers, they were handlers. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. Dr. Warren falsifying death certificates, grief-stricken families too devastated to question inconsistencies, babies sold through a network of adoption agencies that existed only on paper. The Bakers mentioned an agency, Alex remembered. Said they were offering good homes to unwanted babies. His laugh was bitter. "Unwanted. When I spent 7 years aching for my son." Emma squeezed his shoulder. "The police are building their case. With the evidence we've gathered." A knock at the door interrupted her. Alex's head of security entered, his expression grim. "Sir, we have a situation. The Bakers, they're gone." "What? You were watching them?" "They had help." "Professional." 3 black SUVs showed up an hour ago. By the time our team got through the roadblock they'd set up, Alex was already reaching for his phone, but Emma stopped him. "Wait, maybe this is good." "Good? They're getting away." "No," Emma said slowly, "they're running. And people who run make mistakes. More importantly, whoever's behind all this is scared enough to show their hand." On the bed, Tommy whimpered in his sleep. Alex moved instantly to his side, running gentle fingers through the boy's hair until he settled. "We've identified 3 more families," Emma continued. "Parents who lost babies at St. Mary's who might have been victims of this ring. My contact at the FBI is very interested." Alex nodded, not taking his eyes off Tommy. "How long before we can take him home?" "Dr. Harrison says maybe 2 more days." "But Alex?" Emma hesitated. "Are you sure your house is secure? These people, they've already stolen him once. Let them try again." Alex's voice was steel. "The mansion has state-of-the-art security and I've tripled the guards. More importantly..." He smiled as Tommy's hand found his, even in sleep. "More importantly, this time he has a father who knows he's alive. Who's ready to fight for him." Emma gathered her files quietly. "I'll let you know when the FBI team arrives. Try to get some rest." But Alex knew sleep wouldn't come. Not with the weight of these revelations pressing down on him. Not with the knowledge that somewhere out there, other stolen children might be suffering like Tommy had suffered. His phone lit up with another message. His team had tracked the SUVs to a private airfield. Too late to catch them, but another piece of the puzzle. Tommy shifted, his eyes fluttering open. "Dad?" The word was tentative, a question mark at the end. Alex's heart stumbled. It was the first time Tommy had called him that. "I'm here, buddy. I'm right here. The bad people, they said my real parents didn't want me. They lied." Alex's voice was fierce with certainty. "I have proof now, pictures, documents, everything. You were stolen from us. But I found you. And I'm never letting you go again." Tommy's grip on his hand tightened. Outside, dawn was breaking over the city, painting the sky in shades of hope. Somewhere, the Bakers were running, their fears spreading ripples that would help bring down an entire criminal enterprise. But in this quiet room, father and son held onto each other, stronger together than all the lies that had kept them apart. The screen before Alex blurred as he read the words for the 10th time. 99.99% probability of paternity. He sat in Dr. Harrison's office, the morning sun streaming through windows that overlooked the hospital's peaceful gardens. The DNA report trembled slightly in his hands, scientific confirmation of what his heart had known since seeing that butterfly birthmark. "I've rarely seen a match this definitive," Dr. Harrison said softly, closing Tommy's medical file. "He's your son, Mr. Mitchell." Without any doubt. Tommy was in physical therapy, working to rebuild strength after years of malnutrition. Just that morning he'd managed to walk an entire hallway without support, his determined expression so much like Sarah's it made Alex's chest ache. His phone buzzed again, another text from an unknown number. The 4th one today. Each message more threatening than the last. The Bakers had been busy since their escape, reaching out through various channels with their ultimatum. Pay up or watch your reputation burn. "The police want to interview Tommy soon," Dr. Harrison said, watching Alex's face carefully. "Now that he's stronger. Do you think he's ready?" Before Alex could answer, his head of security called. "Sir, we've intercepted another email. They're getting desperate." "How bad?" "They've sent an edited recording to your board of directors. The conversation about buying Tommy. It's cut to make it sound like a straightforward human trafficking deal." Alex's free hand clenched. "Any progress tracking them?" "They're using sophisticated encryption, but we've narrowed it down to somewhere in Canada. The FBI thinks." Another call beeped through, his sister Kate. "I have to take this," Alex cut in. "Keep me posted." "Alex?" Kate's voice was tense. "The board is calling an emergency meeting. They're talking about removing you from the foundation. Your own charity, Alex. We need to handle this carefully. Maybe if we pay them." "No." Alex watched a group of medical students pass by the office window, their white coats a blur of motion. "No more secrets. No more hiding. Think about what you're risking. Everything you've built." "I'm thinking about my son," Alex said quietly. "The son I lost once because I wasn't paying attention. Because I trusted the wrong people. I won't make that mistake again." His phone pinged with a new message, $2 million. Wire transfer to the provided account. Or tomorrow morning, every major news outlet gets the full recording. Imagine the headlines: billionaire philanthropist caught buying children. Alex's response was immediate: meet me. In person. Let's end this. Their reply came quickly: Park Street Cafe. 10 a.m. tomorrow. Come alone or the recording goes public. They took the bait, Alex told the FBI agent who just entered the office. Your teams can handle the rest? We'll be ready. But Mr. Mitchell, if something goes wrong, if that recording gets out, then it gets out. Alex looked down at the DNA results still in his hand. The truth is messy sometimes, but it's still better than lies. A knock at the door interrupted them. Tommy's physical therapist stood there, beaming. Someone has something to show you. Tommy walked in, steady steps, head held high, pride radiating from every movement. Dad, look what I can do. Alex caught him in a gentle hug, feeling the strength returning to his son's too thin frame. Over Tommy's head, he met Dr. Harrison's eyes. She nodded slightly. It was time. Hey buddy? Alex sat down, bringing himself to eye level with his son. Remember how I said I had an important story to tell you? About your mother and what happened when you were born? Tommy's eyes widened. Behind him, Dr. Harrison quietly ushered everyone else out of the office. 7 years ago, Alex began, holding the DNA results like an anchor. In this very hospital, something precious was stolen from me. From us. You were stolen, Tommy? But, the baker said my real parents didn't want me. They lied. About everything. Alex pulled out his wallet, removing the worn photo he always carried. This is your mother. Her name was Sarah. And she loved you so much even before you were born, that she painted clouds on your nursery walls. She gave you that butterfly mark, you know. The exact same one she had on her shoulder. Like mine, Tommy whispered, touching his birthmark through his shirt. Exactly like yours. Because you're our son. Our real son. And I can prove it now. Alex held up the DNA results. This paper tells us what I think we both already knew in our hearts. We belong together. Tommy was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing the photo of Sarah. What happened to her? Alex took a deep breath. She got very sick right after you were born. The doctors couldn't save her. And then some bad people made me believe they couldn't save you either. But they were lying. They took you away and sold you to the bakers. And now the bad people are trying to hurt you? I heard the FBI people talking. They're trying to scare me, Alex admitted. They have a recording of me offering the bakers money for you. They want me to pay them to keep quiet. But you only did that to help me, Tommy said fiercely. To get me away from them? Yes. But some people might not understand that. I might lose my company, my foundation. A lot of people might be very angry with me. Tommy's small hand found his. But we'll still have each other, right? Alex pulled his son close, breathing in the scent of hospital shampoo and something uniquely Tommy. Always. Nothing matters more than that. His phone buzzed again, probably more threats, more demands. But Alex let it ring. Tomorrow would bring its own battles. The bakers would be arrested, the trafficking ring would be exposed, and his reputation might be destroyed. But right now, in this quiet office with Sarah's photo between them, father and son held onto each other and the truth that had finally set them free. Outside, spring rain began to fall, washing away the last traces of winter. And somewhere, Alex thought he could hear Sarah's voice in the gentle drumming. The world needs more dreamers. But sometimes, even more than dreamers, the world needs people brave enough to wake up and fight for what matters most. No. Please, I'll be good. The scream echoed through the mansion's marble halls at 3 a.m., jolting Alex from his light doze in the armchair beside Tommy's bed. Third nightmare in as many nights since bringing him home from the hospital. The security monitor on the bedside table cast a blue glow across Tommy's thrashing form as he fought invisible tormentors in his sleep. Tommy, wake up. You're safe. Alex kept his voice gentle, hands hovering but not touching. They'd learned that lesson the hard way the first night. You're home. No one can hurt you here. Tommy's eyes snapped open, wild and unfocused in the soft glow of the butterfly nightlight. For a moment he didn't seem to recognize where he was, his breath coming in sharp, panicked gasps. That's it, buddy. Deep breaths. Remember what Dr. Cooper taught us? Count with me. Slowly the panic receded. Tommy's eyes focused on Alex's face, then darted around the room, taking in the hand-painted clouds on the ceiling, an exact recreation of Sarah's nursery mural, the state-of-the-art security cameras, the reinforced windows with their bulletproof glass. They were here, Tommy whispered. The bakers. They found me. No one's getting past our security, Alex assured him, finally daring to perch on the edge of the bed. Want to check the monitors again? Tommy nodded. Together, they pulled up the security feed on the tablet, all 16 cameras showing nothing but peaceful darkness and the occasional patrol of the security team. See? We're safe. Alex started to hum absently, an old habit from his sleepless nights after Sarah died. Tommy went very still. That song? Alex stopped, surprised. What about it? I know it. From before. From. Tommy's forehead creased with effort. There was a lady with paint on her clothes. She was singing while she painted butterflies. The breath caught in Alex's throat. Sarah. Your mother. She used to sing that lullaby every night when she was pregnant with you. She said you'd dance around whenever she hit the chorus. I remember her voice, Tommy said wonderingly. It was warm. Like sunshine. Alex's vision blurred. Yes. Exactly like sunshine. A sharp chirp from his phone shattered the moment. Another text from an unknown number. Sweet security system. But what about his school? The park? You can't watch him forever. Alex's hand tightened on the phone. The Bakers had been escalating since their failed blackmail attempt, their threats becoming more specific, more focused on Tommy. The FBI was close to tracking them but not close enough. Was it them again? Tommy asked, his voice small. Before Alex could answer, the mansion's perimeter alarm blared. Tommy flinched, curling into himself as red emergency lights bathed the room in an eerie glow. Status report, Alex barked into his radio. Breach attempt at the east gate, sir, his head of security responded. 2 individuals. They ran when spotted. But sir, they left something. Don't touch it. Get the bomb squad. It's not a device. It's a teddy bear. With a note. Alex's blood ran cold. Tommy had mentioned a teddy bear once, his only toy at the Bakers, taken away as punishment the night before Alex found him. They're playing games, the FBI agent had warned earlier that day. Trying to show they can get close. Standard intimidation tactics. But there was nothing standard about the way Tommy was shaking now, his earlier breakthrough forgotten in the face of fresh terror. I know that bear, he choked out. They used to say if I was bad they'd make me watch them burn it. That I'd be next. Something in Alex snapped. All these weeks of measured responses, of letting the FBI handle things, of playing it safe, while his son relived his trauma every night, jumping at shadows. He pulled out his phone, dialing the private number few people had access to. Okay, call an emergency board meeting. For tomorrow morning. Alex? It's the middle of the night. I don't care. Get them there. All of them. He looked at Tommy, still trembling but watching him with growing curiosity. It's time to end this. No more hiding, no more waiting for the next threat. What are you going to do? I'm going to tell the whole story. Every detail. Release everything to the media before the Bakers can spin it. Let the world see exactly what they did, not just to Tommy, but to all the children they helped traffic. The foundation will survive. Or it won't. But I won't let these people terrorize my son for one more day. After ending the call, Alex sat back down beside Tommy. I have to tell you something important. Tomorrow things might get very crazy. A lot of people will be talking about us, asking questions. Some of them might say bad things about me, about the day I found you. Because you offered them money? Tommy's voice was stronger now. To save me? Yes. Some people won't understand. They'll only see that part of the story. Are you okay with me telling everyone everything? Tommy was quiet for a long moment. Then he started to hum, Sarah's lullaby, slightly off-key but unmistakable. Mom would want the truth, wouldn't she? She painted those clouds so I'd always look up, always be brave. Alex pulled his son close, feeling the steady beat of his heart. When did you get so wise? Must be the Mitchell genes, Tommy mumbled into his shirt, and Alex had to laugh, his first real laugh in days. Outside, the security team was still sweeping the grounds. Tomorrow would bring chaos. Media storms, board meetings, public outcry. But in this room, father and son had found something stronger than fear. Trust, built note by note through a half-remembered lullaby. Want to help me practice what to say tomorrow? Alex asked. Tommy nodded, then hesitated. Can we check the cameras one more time first? Of course. And then maybe I can teach you the rest of Mom's song? I'd like that, Tommy whispered. I'd like that a lot. Mr. Mitchell, you need to see this. Emma Chen's voice trembled with barely contained fury as she spread hospital records across her mahogany desk. Outside her office window, rain pelted the glass, The same cold spring rain that had fallen 7 years ago on the night that had changed everything. Sarah's autopsy report? Alex lifted the top folder with unsteady hands. Look at the toxicology screen. Emma pointed to a highlighted section. These levels of Pitocin are off the charts. Someone deliberately administered a massive overdose during her labor. This wasn't a natural complication, Mr. Mitchell. This was murder. The words blurred before Alex's eyes as fragments of that night rushed back. Sarah's strained but determined voice, the sudden blare of alarms, the rush of medical staff, Dr. Warren's grave face as he delivered the devastating news. Warren. The name felt like poison on Alex's tongue. He orchestrated both Sarah's death and Tommy's theft. It wasn't coincidence at all. No. Emma pulled out another document, her hands shaking with suppressed rage. We found similar patterns in other cases. Wealthy families, complicated deliveries, mothers dying in childbirth while their babies were pronounced dead, only to be trafficked through the ring. But why target us specifically? Your foundation. Emma's expression hardened. You were already known for charitable giving, especially to children's causes. Warren and his accomplices, they didn't just want to steal babies. They wanted to cultivate future donors, wealthy people who would fund children's charities without realizing they were actually supporting trafficking operations. The rain intensified, drumming against the windows like an accusation. All these years, Alex had channeled his grief into helping children, never knowing he was playing directly into the hands of those who had destroyed his family. His phone buzzed, a message from the mansion's security team. Tommy's asking for you. Says he remembers something important. I have to go, Alex stood, gathering the damning files. But I want everything you find on Warren's other cases. Every family, every child. A commotion in the hallway cut him off. Through the glass walls of Emma's office, they saw Dr. Harrison rushing toward them, clutching a worn leather journal. The nurse from that night, she burst out as she entered. The one who assisted Warren with Sarah's delivery. We found her. Alex's heart stuttered. Where? Dead. Dr. Harrison's face was ashen. Apparent suicide 3 months after Tommy's birth. But she left this. She handed over the weathered notebook. She knew what Warren was doing. She was going to expose him, but they got to her first. Alex finished, another death in the growing web of tragedy surrounding his son's birth. The drive home was a blur of rain and revelation. Alex's mind kept returning to Sarah's final moments. Had she sensed something was wrong? Had she tried to warn him? He'd been so focused on her pain, on his own fear. Tommy was waiting in the library when Alex arrived, surrounded by old photo albums that Kate had found in storage. Dad? Tommy's voice was strange, distant. I remember something. From before. Alex sat beside him, noting the album open to Sarah's baby shower photos. What do you remember, buddy? There was music. Tommy's forehead creased with concentration. Not Mom's lullaby, but beeping. Like hospital machines. And a man's voice saying something was wrong, that they needed to hurry. Then a woman crying, saying she couldn't be part of it anymore. The nurse's diary felt heavy in Alex's briefcase. When did you remember this? In my dream last night. But it wasn't scary like the other dreams. It was just sad. Tommy touched a photo of Sarah, her hands resting on her pregnant belly. Mom was there too, I think. Not seeing her, but feeling her? She was scared, but not for herself. For me. Alex pulled his son close, feeling the tremors running through his small frame. You were so loved, Tommy. From the very first moment. Is that why they chose us? Because Mom loved me so much? The innocent question hit like a physical blow. How could he explain that Sarah's very love, their love, had made them targets? That their wealth and social standing had marked them for this elaborate scheme? The bad people, Alex chose his words carefully, thought they could use our love for their own purposes. They thought that taking you away, making me think I'd lost everything, would ensure I'd spend my life trying to help other children to honor your memory. And you did. Tommy's voice was thoughtful. The foundation. Yes. But what they didn't count on was finding you again. Or that the love they tried to use against us would be stronger than their plans. Tommy was quiet for a moment, processing. Then he pointed to another photo, Sarah in her studio, surrounded by her paintings. She liked butterflies too, didn't she? Like our birthmark? She loved them. Said they were proof that beautiful things can come from dark places. Alex touched his son's shoulder, where the matching mark lay beneath his shirt. She painted them everywhere. That's why the nurse was crying, Tommy said suddenly. She saw our matching marks that night. She knew what the bad doctor was going to do and she couldn't stop it. A chill ran through Alex. The diary had mentioned the birthmark, the nurse's final piece of evidence that something wasn't right. She died trying to protect that truth. His phone buzzed again, Emma, with more revelations from the hospital records. But for now, Alex stayed where he was, holding his son as the rain continued to fall. Outside, the spring storm was washing away winter's last traces, just as the truth was finally washing away years of carefully constructed lies. "Dad?" Tommy's voice was small but determined. "Are you going to find the other babies too? The ones the bad doctor took?" "Yes." Alex's voice was steel. "Every single one." "Good." Tommy leaned into him, another piece of memory surfacing. I think I heard them sometimes. Other babies crying. In that place they kept us before the Bakers." Alex made a mental note to tell the FBI. Every fragment of memory could help track down other victims, help other families heal. The rain began to ease and a shaft of sunlight broke through the clouds. It fell across Sarah's photo, making her smile glow as if she were still there, still watching over them. "Mom would be proud of us," Tommy said with certainty. "For being brave. For telling the truth." Alex kissed the top of his son's head, breathing in the scent of safety and home. "Yes, she would. She always said the world needs more dreamers. But I think what she really meant was that the world needs more people willing to wake up and fight for what's right." Together, they turned the page of the album, ready to face whatever shadows the past still held, not as victims but as survivors. As family. The courthouse buzzed with tension as Alex adjusted Tommy's tie. They sat in a private conference room, waiting to testify against Dr. Warren and his trafficking ring. 3 months of investigation had led to this moment. "Remember," Alex said gently, "you only have to tell your story once. I'll be right there with you." Tommy nodded, fidgeting with his new watch, a gift from Alex with a panic button built in. After everything they'd been through, neither of them took safety for granted anymore. "Mr. Mitchell?" FBI agent Collins entered, her expression grave. "We have a situation." The Bakers were spotted in the parking garage. Alex's hand tightened on Tommy's shoulder. "That's impossible. They're supposed to be in custody. They had help escaping. We think," her radio crackled. "What? When?" Her face paled. "They've taken Dr. Warren. Armed. They're demanding to speak with you." Tommy's breath hitched. Alex knelt before him, forcing his voice to stay calm. "It's going to be okay. Agent Collins will stay with you while I—" "No?" Tommy grabbed his arm. "They'll hurt you like they hurt Mom." The words hung in the air. Since discovering the truth about Sarah's death, Tommy's protective instincts had grown as strong as Alex's. "Listen to me." Alex met his son's eyes, Sarah's eyes. "Remember what Mom painted on your nursery walls? The clouds? So I'd always look up," Tommy whispered. "Always be brave." "Exactly. And right now being brave means letting me end this. Once and for all." Agent Collins' radio crackled again. "They're in the east stairwell. 3rd floor. SWAT is positioning, but they're threatening to kill Warren if they see any officers." "Why would they want to kill their own partner?" Tommy asked. Alex understood suddenly. "Because he can implicate them in other cases. They're not just handlers, they're cleaners. When the ring is threatened, they eliminate loose ends," Agent Collins finished. "Like that nurse 7 years ago." Tommy's face hardened with a determination no 8-year-old should have to show. "Go. But take this." He pressed something into Alex's hand, the butterfly charm Sarah had worn during her pregnancy, which they'd found in her jewelry box. Alex closed his fingers around it, feeling its wings bite into his palm. With a final look at his son, he followed Agent Collins into the hallway. The east stairwell was eerily quiet. Alex climbed slowly, the charm a reminder of everything at stake. On the 3rd-floor landing he found them, Chuck and Marlene Baker flanking a bloodied Dr. Warren. "Well, if it isn't the righteous Mr. Mitchell." Marlene's laugh was brittle. "Come to save another poor soul?" "It's over," Alex said quietly. "The FBI has everything, the hospital records, the offshore accounts, the connections to other families. You can't erase this trail." "No," Chuck agreed, pressing his gun harder against Warren's head. "But we can bury it. Starting with the good doctor here. Then maybe we'll pay Tommy one last visit." "You won't touch him." Alex's voice could have frozen fire. "We owned him for 7 years, Marlene snarled. 7 years while you built your precious foundation, donated to our fronts, made us rich. You never owned him." Alex took a step forward. "You stole him. Just like you helped steal other children. But you made one mistake." "Yeah?" Chuck's finger tightened on the trigger. "What's that?" "You forgot that stolen things can find their way home. Several things happened at once. Warren, sensing his chance, drove his elbow into Chuck's ribs. Marlene raised her gun toward Alex. And through the stairwell window, a sniper's laser sight appeared on her chest. "Drop it." Agent Collins' voice rang out as officers burst through both doors. Marlene's finger squeezed. Alex felt something burn across his arm. Then the stairwell erupted in chaos. When it was over, Chuck and Marlene lay handcuffed and subdued. Warren, despite his injuries, was already talking, naming names, desperate to cut a deal. "Dad." Alex turned to find Tommy breaking away from his protective detail, running toward him. His son's face went pale at the sight of blood on Alex's sleeve. "Just a graze," Alex assured him, pulling Tommy close with his good arm. "Nothing can keep me from coming back to you. Not anymore." Tommy pressed his face into Alex's chest, his words muffled but clear. "We did it. We looked up. We were brave." Over his son's head, Alex watched the Bakers being led away. They had stolen 7 years, killed Sarah, hurt countless families. But they hadn't counted on the strength of love, the power of truth, the persistence of memory. "Mr. Mitchell?" Agent Collins approached with the evidence bag. "We found this in their car. I think you should see it." Inside was a photo, Sarah in her hospital bed, holding a newborn Tommy. On the back was a nurse's hurried writing, "Baby boy Mitchell, 3:15 a.m. Distinctive butterfly birthmark matching mothers. Something's wrong. Warren involved. Must tell father." The last words trailed off as if the nurse had been interrupted. She had died trying to save them, but her final message had helped bring them back together. "Can we go home now?" Tommy asked quietly. Alex tucked the photo away, evidence for the trial, but also a precious glimpse of Sarah's last moments with their son. "Yes, buddy. Let's go home." Outside, spring sunlight bathed the courthouse steps. Reporters called out questions, cameras flashed, but Alex focused only on his son's hand in his, on the butterfly charm in his pocket, on the future they would build together. The nightmare was over. The shadows of the past would always be there, but they had emerged stronger, their love tested and proven in the crucible of truth. Sarah would have been proud. As they drove home, Tommy hummed her lullaby, and Alex joined in, their voices carrying the melody she had once sung in a paint-splattered nursery, dreaming of the family they would become. Different than she had imagined, perhaps, but just as beautiful and just as true. The Vermont morning air was crisp with possibility as Alex watched Tommy carefully plant a butterfly bush in their new garden. 6 months had passed since the trials. Dr. Warren had received multiple life sentences, the Bakers weren't eligible for parole for decades, and 17 other trafficked children had been reunited with their families. "Is this deep enough?" Tommy asked, sitting back on his heels. The early summer sun brought out hints of Sarah's auburn in his hair. "Perfect." Alex knelt beside him, helping to position the plant. "Your mom would love this. She always wanted a butterfly garden." They worked in comfortable silence, the kind that comes after storms have passed and trust has been rebuilt. The mansion in Greenwich had too many shadows, too many cameras and security guards. Here, in this restored farmhouse with its sprawling grounds and distant mountain views, they could finally breathe. "Look." Tommy pointed to a butterfly landing on a nearby flower. "It has uneven wings like our birthmark." Alex smiled, remembering the evidence that had first connected them. The birthmark had become more than a tragic coincidence. It was their symbol of hope, of family found against impossible odds. "Dad?" Tommy's voice was thoughtful as he patted soil around another plant. "Do you think the other kids are okay? The ones like me?" Alex sat back, considering. The foundation had shifted its focus, now dedicated to supporting families affected by trafficking. Every week brought news of another reunion, another healing story. "They're getting there," he said honestly. "Just like you. Some days are harder than others, but they have people who love them, who'll never let them go again." Tommy nodded, understanding more than any 8-year-old should. "Like when I have bad dreams but then I remember I'm safe now?" "Exactly like that." Alex brushed dirt from his son's cheek, marveling at his resilience. "And those dreams, they're getting less frequent, right?" "Yeah. Dr. Cooper says it's because I'm processing the trauma." Tommy said the big word carefully, proud of understanding it. "She says gardening helps too. Something about putting down roots?" Alex's throat tightened. Tommy's therapist had suggested the move to Vermont, had encouraged them to build something new together. The garden had been Tommy's idea, a place of beauty growing from darkness, just like their family. A car approached down their long driveway. Kate, arriving for their weekly family dinner. She'd moved nearby to help with Tommy's homeschooling until he was ready for regular classes. Can we show Aunt Kate the butterfly bush? Tommy was already running to greet her, his previous solemnity forgotten in childish excitement. Alex watched them embrace, remembering Kate's tears at the trial, her fierce protection of her nephew, her unwavering support through the media storm that followed their story's exposure. The garden looks amazing, Kate called out, letting Tommy drag her toward their morning's work. She carried a familiar box, Sarah's old gardening tools found in storage. Mom's trowel is perfect for the new flowers, Tommy explained, reaching for the box. And Dad says we can paint the shed like her nursery mural, with clouds and butterflies and everything. Dad. The word still felt like a miracle every time Tommy said it. That first time in the hospital had been tentative, questioning. Now it flowed naturally, strengthened by months of building trust, of choosing each other every day. Sarah would love all of this, Kate said softly, watching Tommy arrange the tools with careful precision. The garden, the fresh start, how you two heal each other. Alex nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Sarah's presence felt especially close here, in this place of growth and renewal. Sometimes he caught Tommy humming her lullaby while he worked, an unconscious connection to the mother he'd known for such a brief time. We're planting wildflowers next, Tommy announced, returning to them. All the kinds that attract butterflies. And Dad's building bee houses too, because bees are important for the ecosystem. Someone's been paying attention in science lessons, Kate laughed. Well, Mom was right. Tommy's voice turned serious. The world needs more dreamers. But it also needs people who make dreams grow. Alex and Kate exchanged glances, both struck by the wisdom in those words. Tommy had inherited Sarah's artist soul, but tempered it with his own hard-won understanding of how beauty and pain could coexist, how hope could take root in the hardest soil. The afternoon passed in gentle productivity. They planted flowers, shared stories, planned future projects. Kate brought out a picnic dinner, and they ate on the new deck overlooking their growing garden. As the sun began to set, painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple, Tommy grew quiet. What are you thinking about, buddy? Alex asked. I was just remembering that first day. When you found me. Tommy leaned against him. I was so scared, but something inside knew you were safe. Like my heart remembered you even if my mind didn't. Alex pulled his son close, breathing in the scent of earth and growth and home. I knew too. The moment I saw you, something broken inside me started to heal. Because love is stronger than fear? Tommy asked, echoing words from his therapy sessions. Yes. And because family always finds its way back together. A butterfly drifted past, its wings catching the last rays of sunlight. Tommy watched it with peaceful contentment, secure in his place in the world. No more looking over his shoulder, no more jumping at shadows. Just this. The garden they were building, the love they were growing, the future they were planting seed by precious seed. Dad? Tommy's voice was sleepy now, the day's work catching up with him. Yes, buddy? I'm glad you found me. I'm glad we're home. Alex looked out over their garden, where Sarah's tools lay ready for tomorrow's work, where butterflies danced above new growth, where hope had finally taken root. Me too, son, he whispered. Me too. The sun sank behind the mountains, but its warmth lingered in the earth, in their hearts, in the promise of all the tomorrows stretching before them. And somewhere, Alex thought he could hear Sarah's voice in the evening breeze, her lullaby carried on butterfly wings, blessing the family that had found its way back to love.